Good morning. Okay. So welcome to our first panel from the Capitol to the White House, inside our attorneys' perspectives on how they got there and what they do. So we are in Washington, D.C. It is an incredibly special city. Most of us did not grow up here, but we had transitioned here and made it home and made it careers. D.C. is a really unique place where you can work at a law firm, in government, at NGOs, nonprofits, whatever you might think. And because we are in such a unique setting, we wanted to highlight the unique careers that attorneys can have in Washington, D.C. So my panel here today, they have worked throughout the legislative and executive branches. I'm going to let them introduce themselves one by one, and then we'll get into some questions and have a great conversation about unique careers in government, and hopefully, I know we have some law students here, maybe this will be something inspiring for all of you, or if someone's thinking about public service, but we just wanted to give you a broader perspective on what it's like to be an attorney in DC. So thank you guys all again for being here, and my ethics department is going to be very upset with me because I did say this first. Hi, I am an attorney with the federal government. I am here today in my personal capacity, and the views I express here are my own and do not represent the views of the Department of Energy or the United States. So with that, I'm going to pass it first to Julie Babaya.
Thank you, Ani. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for organizing this panel, and thank you to the Armenian Bar Association for organizing this event. My name is Julie Babayan. I am originally from Boston, Massachusetts, and I've been in Washington, D.C. since 2010. I moved to Washington, D.C. when I was fresh out of law school, and I came here to work in a law firm. I had done a summer associate summer here, loved it, but I think actually my first interaction with Washington, D.C. professionally actually started a lot earlier than that. I was an intern up on Capitol Hill, and I see Brian Armenian walking in. Just as I'm saying this, I would be remiss if I didn't say that I was an intern with the Armenian Assembly, as were others on this panel as well. And I interned for then U.S. Senator John Kerry from Massachusetts. And I think that's when I first decided that I really liked working in public policy. So even though I came to Washington, D.C., I worked for several years at a big law firm here. I was in a telecommunications regulatory practice. What I ultimately wanted to do was work in public policy, and I got the opportunity to work in the U.S. Senate for U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, and then I worked for the House Committee on Energy and Commerce on the House side. So had a nice opportunity to work in the U.S. Senate, work in the U.S. House, work for a personal office, and then work as committee counsel. And now I am at Adobe, and I do government relations and public policy.
I shouldn't have sat next to Julie because our careers track quite closely. Thank you for having me, Ani, and thank you for organizing this panel. I'm Lauren Sarkeesian. I am originally from Michigan, and have been in DC since 2013. I also moved here shortly after law school to pursue a career in public policy. I, however, also had the seed planted some years earlier when I interned with the Armenian Assembly for a summer with my home state senator, Senator Carl Levin, and was on his permanent subcommittee on investigations, which does great oversight work. And that sort of set the stage for me to come back to DC post law school, and followed that path a little bit. Started in the Senate, where I was at the Senate Health Committee, which stands for Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, and was on their oversight team. So did a little stint there while I was looking for sort of a more permanent spot, and went from there to the Obama administration, where I was in the White House Office of Legislative Affairs. I spent the tail end of the Obama administration there. So closed out the lights in 2017. And from there, went back to the Hill, spent a little time on the House side working for Congressman Don Beyer, and so spent a couple of years there, and then left to go to civil society when I sort of gained an interest in tech policy, specifically in privacy and AI, and where it intersects with criminal justice stuff. And worked in a think tank for a few years, and back to the government in an oversight body that's pretty small and obscure, the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. And then I just 6 months ago left there, and I'm now at Apple in their legal department. Over to Autumn.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for hosting this panel. Thank you so much, Melanie, for presenting, and it's an honor to sit up here with Julie and Lauren and then Mr. Guest, Edgar, who I kind of came up with over the years. I moved here 2003, like Julie, and we have a lot of similarities and glide paths. I was an Armenian Assembly intern, was an intern for my senator from Connecticut, and I kind of view the first couple of years I was in DC as that symphonic, orchestral from Peter and the Wolf, where he's like really innocent and he's sort of like skipping in the woods, and then he encounters all kinds of dangerous beasts. Somehow like survives at the end. So that's like truncating all of those 23 years. Went to law school, spent 14 years in the Justice Department, 2 years in private practice, litigated in a majority of the United States circuit courts of appeals, done some Supreme Court work, argued or had litigations in the 3rd of the 94 federal district courts. I'm currently an associate professor at law at the George Washington University Law School, also the academic dean. So I have various curricular responsibilities. I teach constitutional law, federal courts, but my strongest area is administrative law. A couple years ago, I started the school's Supreme Court clinic, and love sitting at the intersection of law and policy. And frequently, my practice is if I ever get a call from the Hill or from the White House or from government, take the call however I can. It's sort of a function of civil service.
And I'm going to start with a question for Julie. So as you mentioned in your intro, you previously worked for a U.S. Senator as assistant counsel and then transitioned to a House committee. So can you walk us through what a day in the life in each position looked like? And because you went from working for a senator with particular policy objectives and then to a House committee with a broader set of objectives, can you walk us through a little bit of how those responsibilities compared, how your work adjusted to fit one senator versus an entire committee, and just give us some insight into that, because it really is a unique opportunity. So,
For sure. It is a unique opportunity, and I feel very fortunate that I had a chance to work for both personal office and a committee, and get a flavor for what life was like on the Senate side and also on the House of Representatives side. In a personal office, typically you have staff who have a lot of responsibilities and a lot of ground that they have to cover in terms of topic areas for public policy. The staff is typically smaller, and they're expected to really be, sort of conversant or expert in a number of different areas. If you're on a committee, you tend to specialize a little bit more. So when I worked for the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, part of the jurisdiction of that committee is technology policy issues. And so I was able to go a little bit deeper into, a topic area that is a little bit fewer number of things that we were thinking about versus when you're in a personal office and you may have responsibility for your member of Congress or your U.S. Senator for a number of topic areas that could be as diverse as immigration and technology policy and artificial intelligence and a number of other policy areas that are sort of thrown into the mix. So one of the things that I really enjoyed day to day in terms of what it looked like is that when you were in the personal office, sometimes you would take a lot of meetings with stakeholders, and you would be able to learn a whole different area just because your stakeholders had that interest or had a problem that they were bringing to you, or had a area that they wanted the senator to look into. And so one of the things that I really enjoyed about that is that you could have a completely different day-to-day depending on who it was who you were meeting with and what kind of follow-up you wanted to do with that information. I worked for a US senator who not only thought of herself as a legislator, but she also thought of herself as somebody who wanted to use all of the tools in the US Senate toolbox to be able to accomplish good public policy outcomes for her constituents. And part of that means sometimes you're not just working on legislation, you're not just working on writing a bill that addresses a problem, but you might be working on oversight. You might be writing a strongly worded letter to the head of a federal agency and asking them to use their existing authority to implement something that works better for the constituents. So you may not actually need a brand new law on the books and need to push for something entirely new. You might be instead asking them to do something like write guidance or fix a problem. So that was something that I really enjoyed. And at the Committee on Energy and Commerce, I did a bit of oversight as well. So that was kind of nice.
Well, I'm actually gonna have you, we're gonna pass down. That was easy. Oh wait, but then they can't hear me. I'm sorry.
Rather just have a conversation, but we can do it this way. Thank you very much, Julie. That was really informative. So Lauren, similar question, just in terms of transitioning executive to legislative. So you were first in the White House Office of Legislative Affairs, and then later a legislative counsel to a member of Congress. So both worked on legislation, but one for the executive branch and one for the legislative branch. So can you talk to us about what the legislative process looked like in both sections of our government, how it compared, where there were similarities, and at any point were you, whether you were at the White House or then in Congress, were you then going back and working with the other branch? So what that relationship and those experiences were like?
Absolutely. So we very much were working with both branches, especially. So I worked. Very nice. I worked, when I was at the White House, I worked in the Office of Legislative Affairs. So we were really at the juncture of, working with the legislative branch and the executive branch. So we were, very much reaching out to legislators, policymakers on a daily basis and trying to sort of pitch our agenda and make sure the president's priorities were making it into legislation. I'd say, to answer your first question, the biggest differences are probably that first, working in the most high-profile place, the White House, everybody, every move that you make is news making. Everything that you put out is, headline news. Whereas when you're working for a member of Congress, often you're trying to get a headline, you're trying to be out there, you're trying to get your messages seen. And also, first of all, there were a lot of similarities between the two, again, because I was working in sort of a legislative function in both places. But I think one of the other sort of biggest differences was sort of the day-to-day, both stress and fun of working in the White House. It's just everything is a little bit more high stakes. You have a lot more sort of opportunities for fun events like we were talking about that year. And, seeing the president or having yourself or your bosses brief the president or write memos to the president. But also it can be quite stressful. But honestly, there's a lot of similarity. Oh, sorry, I left out one of the bigger differences as well, and this is something that Autumn and I mentioned were discussing earlier, is that being in the White House, another major function, especially of the legislative folks, the legislative team, is needing to confirm all of your nominees, and that is a major struggle sometimes. It was during the end of the Obama years, and I worked on that quite a bit. Worked on some pretty major confirmations and confirmation attempts, including the confirmation of Merrick Garland, attempted confirmation to the Supreme Court. So I guess, those experiences kind of showed me, how it was very much, the political wins can very much determine your ability to actually, do your job and carry out your legislative plans or confirmation plans. I think a lot of my experiences were determined by just the time that I was there, being at the end of the Obama administration and facing a lot of sort of blockage by Congress. But again, both places, are fast-paced. You're able to really, make major impact, whether it's for a member of Congress, a senator, a committee, or being in the White House. So I'll move there.
Thank you, that was helpful. Also, thank you for this microphone, I really appreciate it. So that was very interesting, thank you for sharing. Now moving on to Autumn. So you have had an extensive career in government, and I have many questions for you, but I'm going to start off with your time as first litigator in the Department of Justice and then transitioning to senior counsel for national security in the civil division. So unique positions, would like to know about the transition between the two and what it really looked like to be senior counsel for national security, what your responsibilities entailed, and how do I phrase this? And if any of your litigation experience tied into what you were then doing as senior counsel for that area. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I also wanted to sort of play the reverse Uno card just for a moment. Ani has a remarkable and impressive career in the Department of Energy's GC's office, but she's the moderator, so we don't get to ask her questions, but I at least want to note that. So my time in the Justice Department was probably like one of the two most important experiences in my professional identity formation. I was able to get in a process right after you finish law school, and it's relatively difficult. Maybe I was lucky to get in. And then the great financial recession happened. They put a hiring freeze, and then they did buyouts for all of the experienced people. And then people like me were left with lots of different cases. So using the Peter and the Wolf analogy, within a couple of months of getting my law license, they were like, you get to go argue this loser of the case in the United States Court of Appeals. And I did lose it. But I started learning through failure. And through enough repetitions and efforts, I started to develop a capability I didn't even know was possible. I was doing crazy things like solo chairing class actions, the defense of which were against ACLU and Yale Law School. So just 15 people versus me. Which is like a zombie game, right? Like it's like it's very hard to win and under those circumstances, and I didn't. But through like a very high quantity of those types of experiences and having to just argue and travel and brief and practice and strategize over and over and over again, I essentially benefited from having this ridiculously capable training that allowed me to have this baseline upon which I could do more interesting things. And what transitioned me into the national security space was that the subject matters that I realized I was actually quite naturally good at and interested in were things I didn't actually study in law school. I never took constitutional law too, I never took federal courts, I never took administrative law. These are all the things I currently teach. I learned them kind of on the street, but I realized that the department was not adequately leveraging the sort of cross-cutting disciplines between constitutional law, national security, foreign relations. There were some gaps, and they essentially identified me to sort of close those gaps. So, for example, like under the Obama administration, here at the White House, I was defending like the wet foot, dry foot policy, you know, with regard to Cubans, which is like a huge foreign relations thing with like 7 or 8 different agencies all wanting different stuff, you know, in the courts. So part of, I guess the closing thought I have is, at its very base, it really comes down to not just are you competent, but can people trust you to deliver on the outcomes? And if the answer is yes to both, and they like you even mildly, on a long enough timeline, you're just going to keep getting asked to do more and more and more important stuff. That's sort of what happens.
Thank you, Adam. That was really interesting. And it is, when I first joined the federal government, I was warned that you're going to be asked to do quite a lot really fast, even if you are relatively junior. And I see you all nodding too, that this is just what it's like. But it is such a great experience to learn trial by fire, learn on the fly, and I think it just makes you a stronger attorney. But at least in my career, I've had really great people in the federal government kind of guide me through and be great resources so that you could come up to speed fast and serve the public the best you can. So thank you for sharing that unique aspect of what it is like to be a public servant. And I think maybe sticking with the presidential theme, if I could go back to Adam, because Adam had the opportunity to work on a presidential transition. Which I also, again, if I'm wrong about like other members of the bar who have had these types of experiences, tell me who they are, I'd love to meet them. But so Adam, if you could just walk us through what that was like, what it entails, the role of an attorney during a presidential transition, anything that you're able to share from that time, I think would be really informative for the group.
Yeah, absolutely. And just connecting to some of the immediate prior conversation, I was third in rank at OIRA in 2020. And this is as a career guy, I think this is the whole, like, if they trust you and you're competent, you move up. Even in an administration that you know, has caution with regard to career employees, if you are quite simply trusted and you're able to reliably do things. Actually had a perfectly pleasant experience with a number of roles across the political aisle where they just kept putting me in things because I was like, I didn't leak, I was competent, I was honest, and I was efficient, and I got along with people. And I wasn't like asking for anything. They're just like, oh, we need you for this. I guess I have 2 experiences to draw from. One was in government. As a career person during presidential transitions, there are usually teams from during the interregnum where the president-elect gets to send their teams in, and there's a coordination process. That didn't happen in the 2020 election until like very, very close to the end. But as a career person, and you in sort of probably one of the higher ranking career people in the civil division of the Justice Department, which is essentially the defense law firm for the entire executive branch. Every time there's like a big policy, like a federal program or something like that, or something that's kind of big and bold, it's this one entity within the entire Justice Department that essentially takes the lead on that. So it becomes really, really important for those things. So I was authorized internally to just do basic things like create briefing books. You know, like it just, because I was like, I'm still going to be here. I'm a career person. Is this fine? And the answer is yes. So that was one thing. So that when the Biden team came in, I simply just did my duty and was like, here's a stack of stuff. And then they're like, hey, we need you here for lots of different things. And during the first week of 46, that'd be like President Biden's administration, I was one of 3 people running the entire civil division. Usually you need like 14 to 17, sometimes 20. I was like one of 3. And we were dealing with like what has to happen in the next hour. What has to happen in the next 2 hours? And eventually we worked up to like what has to happen in the next day? What has to happen in the next 5 days? That type of thing. Then when I was outside of government, because again, I'm always willing to help out, I was asked to participate in a presidential transition, from the outside, and I did. And my expertise was, essentially training people on how to comply with the law, and the law is pretty complicated with regard to regulatory stuff. That's like the area I'm extremely good at, and as well as like the Freedom of Information Act, the Privacy Act, how to get presidential administration in good shape, and that only helps making our government better. So those are the things that I was pleased to do.
Great, thank you so much. So I think I have one more question for Lauren, and then I think maybe we can transition more into a conversation. I have some broader questions that might be of interest to our guests. So Lauren, I want to ask you about your time working for an independent agency under the executive branch. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about the role of independent agencies, and I'm particularly interested in what it was like transitioning from policy-oriented work. There's an agenda that they're trying to accomplish, and then you're going into independent work, and how you had to kind of pivot your analysis and your role in general. So can you just walk us through that a little bit? Because I don't think a lot of people know that there are several independent agencies that serve a distinct purpose that really is, independent is like the key word there.
Sure. So first I'll explain a little bit about what that agency is and does, because like I said, it is pretty niche. So I worked at the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board, like I said, called PCLOB sometimes for short. Kind of ugly. So they are independent oversight body that sits, it's kind of an anomaly, it sits within the executive branch, but does oversight over the executive branch for purposes of, they do oversight over surveillance programs for purposes of pushing for privacy and civil liberties protections, both on behalf of Americans and foreigners. And that PCLOB is headed by a bipartisan board of 5 members. So it is split, it's, like I said, it's bipartisan. It depends on the president at the time. The president nominates, 3 members of their own party and 2 members of the opposing party. And so I went in during the Biden administration to work for the chairperson. And to back up, I guess, give a little bit of the career, kind of how I got there. I had worked on those same issues. I worked on surveillance and, like I said, tech privacy kind of stuff policy in civil society. I was working at New America at the Open Technology Institute, sort of think tank and an advocacy org within a think tank, working on those same issues. And my prior boss became the chairperson of PCLOB during Biden's time. And so again, because it's headed by, and it's similar to the structure of like the FTC or FCC, some of these other independent commissions. And because she was the head and she knew me, she kind of pulled me over there to work directly for her. So I wanted to give that context to say that while, yes, I was working at an independent agency, I was working for somebody with a specific view, and she's an expert in the surveillance field, but had come from a policy background as well. And so the way it works there is that each member, and it's a small agency, so each member just gets one staff member to advise them, and I worked as hers. And then there is a career civil service staff of mostly attorneys who do more of what you're saying is like the independent oversight work. And but to your question, so it kind of, there were some similarities. There's similarities, especially to my work previously, working in Congress and having to brief members or prepare members for a hearing or whatever it may be. There was some of that same kind of work where I'm keeping tabs on what's happening legislatively and advising her. But there was also sort of the different work of reviewing, these long-term oversight projects that they had done, the civil service staff had done, and deciding where we needed to go with it, what edits were needed, maybe to, we were doing oversight of, things like FISA 702, major surveillance law, which is kind of a hot topic today. I think it's excited right now. But so we would have to review that, very independent work, and at the board level, they would decide what changes were needed or what edits, and take votes on things so that it was, only moving forward in a bipartisan fashion. And it could be a struggle at times, but and I will say also that because it was a very, like I said, sort of unique place sitting within the federal government, but also focusing on oversight of intelligence and our surveillance authorities. This is, and we were talking about this before the panel, it's an issue that really cuts across sort of ideologies, and no president wants their surveillance authorities limited. So it didn't really matter that that we were sort of nominated by Biden. We made broad, bold, I would say, policy proposals that Biden certainly did not like, and so it's a little bit of a strange issue and a strange place, but yeah, it was interesting to work on those issues.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you all, that was really interesting. I hope the audience found it interesting as well. So now I'm going to move into just some broader questions, and we can make this a discussion. Feel free to pass the mic to you, Julie, and you guys can share on that end. But I wanted to get into some bigger picture questions about public service and careers in the government. My first one being, there's a lot of representations of the government in the media, like Feed, Parks and Rec, House of Cards, like really running the gamut. And I think people have a lot of misconceptions about what it is like to work in the government, regardless of branch. So have you all encountered any misconceptions about what it's like to be in public service, and anything you want to share about that, especially if people are interested in getting into public service? What might discourage people from joining and maybe alleviate some of those fears?
Sure. First of all, I'll say, in my experience, it's definitely more likely than House of Cards.
100%.
But I think one of the things that I've found to be true, and that is actually very encouraging for anybody who is interested in this type of work, is that you can dive right in often, and depending on who you're working for, whether it's a committee in either the House or the Senate, or in a personal office, or in a federal agency or department, I think that one of the sort of main points to remember is that you have a privileged position to be able to make a real impact on some of these topic areas that you're sort of uniquely positioned to influence. And I think that the idea that you're coming up with ideas for how to approach problems in a vacuum is not exactly right. Often what you're trying to do is you're trying to meet with stakeholders and subject matter experts who can teach you about what they're seeing from their lens, and then you're in a position of being able to evaluate, well, what were some of the things that are going to lead to the best outcome here? So I think that that's sort of encouraging for folks that are interested in getting into this work. You don't have to have all of the answers immediately. You can talk to people who will be actually thrilled to talk to you, and then arrive at something based on your collective understanding of who are the best people to be able to advise you, and what available information is there out there that you can bring to bear for addressing these issues. But definitely more food than House of Cards.
100%.
Less murder.
Anyone else want to take that question? Anything else?
So, public service. I still think the value proposition is strong, at least with regard to federal public service. That's really what I can speak to. There are certain things that only the sovereign can do, right? And you can see it, you live it all the time. And for a young, especially young attorney, or even a mid-career attorney looking to distinguish themselves or have an enhanced sense of mission, that presents a very strong value proposition. 100% of my public service, in terms of the actual day job from which then they just kept detailing me all over the place, was the Justice Department. And why I like that was because you're representing the United States. It's actually vested with the authority to represent the entire country on the matter before the court with the third branch of government. I had prosecutorial authority that is only vested by statute to the Attorney General and his designees, so DOJ prosecutor type. And I was able to do really remarkable things that were utterly impossible to do, like structurally impossible to do, unless you're actually at the U.S. Department of Justice. So speaking just on that, I think the public service that has these intersections with sort of sovereignty and then important societal policies or functions is richly rewarding. At the same time, part of that social contract was, you get paid less, you have a higher sense of mission, and you have a sense of job security. You don't have to worry about that so much. That's changed, obviously, intentionally so. Right? Like that was part of the goal. And remember, I'm not in government, so I can say whatever I want. But like literally reading like the quotes, like the intended goals, was actually to cause a reduction in force in the entire civil service staff, and also to reduce, at least the claimed goal is to reduce the politicization of the civil staff. So that was rough. Like that was rough for anyone who was a GS employee in government, right? Like those were weird times. It would have been weird for me to have to respond to a bot saying 3 things I accomplished every single week, and getting like 4 or 5 different, are you sure you don't want to quit? Like emails, like that would have been weird. I think that was like a one and done. I don't see that coming back. I even see within like the Trump administration
administration, most of the people who were like the important cabinet secretaries and the deputies, like actually wanted to keep their people because they can't get the stuff done without the people to do the things. So there was, and that's where you're seeing a fair amount of like rehiring taking place. So I think it does make sense to do public service. Obviously, we live in a time where there's a high level of divergence on, things that are political, whereas they used to be sort of less political. So you have to be comfortable with like, we're going this way. Okay, we're going this way now. Okay, we're going this way. So the statement in the Justice Department Civil Division is to be successful, you have to have a high degree of moral elasticity. And essentially you have to be like, that's what it is. My oath is to the Republic, and that's what the President wants, and my job is to defend that. And I'm gonna like do that like full force. So everything from like death penalty to like it's gonna be like the spicy gumbo stuff, right? So you just have to develop like a toleration for that, and then you'll be just fine. But I think it's worthwhile. Anything to add? Or disagree with?
No, I agree. I will add to that there are reasons that I'm now outside the federal government. As I said, I left this past year to go to Apple. I think that what Julie said is still true though. I think that it's just that you have to take, if you're getting into public service, yes, you can have impact, and I think you have to take sort of the long view though. It can, as Adam was laying out, it can take years to, for things to swing back in whatever direction you want it to go. And your change, even then, may be only incremental. But you can have impact. It's just, you gotta put up with a lot along the way as well.
Yeah, I know I'm the moderator, but I'm gonna jump in here too, why not? And again, I am here in my personal capacity, all the views I expressed are my own. But what Anna was saying about, so I am a career civil servant for the Department of Energy, and I've been there since 2023. I was one of the employees who were sending those 3 bullets every week, getting the emails, do you still want your job? And still there, I love the work I do, and I think going into public service, and this is something that I always wanted to do, was because of the broader mission of you are there to serve the American people, regardless of what they believe in, who they are, where they live. Like, there is a broader purpose to this, and at least for the Department of Energy, it's to help keep the lights on, make things affordable, make sure our country is secure, because energy security is national security. So, despite, and again, every administration is different, and that's only natural that as administrations change, policies change, objectives change, and you do your best to support the administration within the confines of the law and the statutory responsibility and obligations and parameters of what the agency is allowed to do as specified by Congress. And regardless of those changes, you just kind of have to remember the bigger purpose is the American people. And while you are a small cog in that wheel, you do serve a really important purpose. And I think as a public servant or someone who's formerly in public service or thinking about going to public service, you just kind of have to remember there is a bigger picture, and you weather whatever the situation may be, and you just do your best, regardless of the challenges that are thrown at you. Yeah. Sorry, that was a tangent. I just felt compelled to say that. That was great.
I also had to send those bullets.
Yeah.
Even at an oversight body. I still have an oversight body.
Yeah. So,
But
anyway, all right. So maybe this is a good time to transition into. I have 2 other questions I want to ask you all, especially since a few of you are no longer in public service, and every career has a season, and as you transition from one type of career to the next, there's always something you can take with you that you've learned. So I'm curious, for those of you who are in the private sector or in academia now and still practicing, what did you learn from your time in public service that has impacted how you practice today? Anything that you've taken with you from
Right, all right. I would say that I think there are some skills that really are valuable across, regardless of whether you are working for a legislator or in the executive branch or now at a private company. I think it is always valuable to be sort of a strong writer who can write very concisely, who can boil down complex, public policy issues into a concise, sort of clear statement for your probably very busy bosses who don't have time to read lengthy memos. They will probably just read the one paragraph executive summary or listen to your quick 2-minute version when you brief them. I think having the ability to boil down those subjects into, because again, I was working on especially, at P Club and before that in civil society, I was working on some pretty niche and weedy surveillance issues and sort of sometimes novel areas of Fourth Amendment law. And I think, again, having the ability to sort of provide a quick overview of the landscape and give a brief description of the key issues is crucial and will be the reason that, as I was saying, you will be relied upon or pushed into various roles given other opportunities. And I found that to be the case in many federal, and it's often the reason that I got certain roles was because I had that ability. And it wasn't necessarily always like, and Julie was kind of describing this earlier, I wasn't necessarily always like the foremost expert on whatever issue going into those roles, but it was like you have the ability to lay it all out, look at it, provide a quick take for your boss, and that's like valuable in many different roles, policy, legal, beyond.
And corporate. And I'll plus one to that too, because that ability that Lauren was just describing, being able to brief your boss ahead of a hearing or being able to write a concise encapsulation of what are the next steps here. These are the same skills that are important in corporate America as well. And you're going to have the opportunity to brief your executive before something that will advance your goals from that perspective too. And so it's the same skill set. So even though you might be learning the sort of public policy issues in artificial intelligence or what have you, that's not really the sort of key learnings from working in these various positions. It's more the sort of ability to work on your soft skills too.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would add, and these are very, very great points. The question is, what do you take from government outside? In one respect, I'm a special government employee still because I am a voting member on the Administrative Conference of the United States, which is a public-private advisory partnership. But I'm mostly out of government. The only thing I can't do is lobby or engage. I have an additional statutory disability that prohibits me from taking illegal drugs, which I don't do. So no cocaine. There's like an additional no cocaine rule. But what I really take from my government service is understanding that at the core, as like attorneys, more or less, we're here to solve problems. And that starts initially with like identifying the problem. And then the second part is identifying what is the definition of success. If you sort of figure out what the actual problem is, what the actual cause is, and the definition is like what is success for the people who get to decide what that is. And sometimes you have to help them with that, because they might say something that's their apparent success, but their real success is actually something else that they're not really enunciating. Then you can just deploy your knowledge and skills to sort of help to achieve that. And that's something that in government happens like all the time and in very, very large quantities. Problem. Then you have to figure out how to triage it and resolve it, whether it's in litigation, whether it's in the White House, whether it's in an agency.
whether it's, in Senator Warren's office, and she's like extremely powerful, influential senator. So that's what I've had. I have sort of two intersecting ways to answer that. The first is, because we're at the Armenian Bar Association. I would say as an Armenian, I still have like this generationally enduring gratitude to the United States for taking like my entire family in like 100 years ago, following the genocide. So that sense of wanting to get back to serve the Republic is a consistent thanks for that opportunity, like a life-saving opportunity. With regard to public service, just because I'm like a constitutional law guy, I really care about the oaths clause, like of the Constitution. My oath is to the Constitution, and the executive branch, right? I serve entirely in the executive branch outside of interning. It is to the Republic, and Article 2 of the Constitution makes it pretty clear that the president's really powerful. Like take care clause authorities, various enumerated specific war powers. He has the appointments power, a number of others. So that also is just another way of saying humility. My job when I'm in public service is to effectuate the will of the American people via their elected president. It doesn't matter what the views of the president are, because that actually has nothing to do with what my service is for. I'm serving the Republic via the president. And if it is legal, my job is to find a way to get to yes. And if it is illegal, my job is to lay that out in excellent terms with the right type of bounding so that it is, that analysis is well taken. And then whether it is listened to or not, again, is not my direct business. So remember, like I know that sounds bold, but like President Lincoln, the Emancipation Proclamation was entirely unconstitutional. And he hoped that it would become constitutional later on. But as a career government service employee, like I would, like if that came to me, I'd be like, this is unconstitutional because of this. But I wouldn't like go into like some war to stop it from happening, right? It's like ultimately the president has to make those choices. In the field of national security, those authorities are really gray, right? Like the president can order directed killings of essentially anyone abroad with absolutely no consequence whatsoever domestically, right? So like those are the spaces where hard choices have to be made. I served under President Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden, and my function was the same for them.
I think my answer is simple. It's just using our skills in whatever way we can to help improve the American government and have it better serve the American people. And sometimes that requires understanding that, again, it could take a long time. It could be very small incremental change that moves the ball forward. And sometimes it's, and again, kind of coming back to your first question for me, sometimes it's hearing directly, if you're in Congress, if you're working on behalf of a congressperson, sometimes it's hearing directly from your constituents and making their case in Congress, sort of directly representing, participating in representative government, or sometimes it's from the White House where you're doing a large, policy change or pushing for large policy change on behalf of the American people in a more sort of removed way, but doing what you think is best. So I think it's just pushing forward your skills to help improve our government. And
I think similar to what Lauren said, I think that it's a real privilege to work on helping to work on sound public policy that improves outcomes that help people. And I think similar to what Adam was getting at, I think that our unique heritage as Armenians perhaps gives us a superpower in making us cognizant of looking out for the little guy. And if we can sort of bring a little bit of that to our work, then I think that's a good thing.
That's great. Thank you all so much. So with that, our first panel of the day concludes.
concludes, we'll take a little break.